Greetings chess players! Today I'm going to introduce a very unusual retrograde logic, the dead position logic. Also, this is the final video of this series. If you don't know what retrograde chess puzzle is, check the previous video. So according to the FIDE chess rules, the game is drawn when a position is reached from which a checkmate cannot occur by any possible series of legal moves. This immediately ends the game provided that the move producing this position was legal. Such position is called the dead position. This dead position is a very important rule because it can drastically change the winner of the game. See this. Except, blah blah, if a player does not complete the prescribed number of moves in an allocated time, the game is lost by the player. However, the game is drawn if the position is such that the opponent cannot checkmate the player's king by any possible series of legal moves. That actually makes sense. If a player has virtually no way to be checkmated, then even if they ran out of time, it's a draw. This principle also applies to some other win conditions. For example, the electric divine swinging or third repeated illegal moves. Every online chess platform you know doesn't correctly follow the FIDE chess rules because evaluating the dead position is extremely difficult. Because of that, some games in the online chess platforms actually ended with incorrect winner in the perspective of the FIDE chess rules. I'm not claiming they must follow the FIDE chess rules, but still it's good to know. We are more interested in a dead position rather than a specific player having no way to win. Let me explain what the dead position is with a simple example. This is an endgame of king versus king and queen. Here's the thing. Can you guess the black's next move? Many of you will answer black will capture the queen. Black has no other options anyway. But of course, after the move, this is a draw. But that's wrong. According to the FIDE chess rules, as soon as the dead position is reached, the game ends immediately. And see the position. Black has only one legal move and that leads to a draw. So this position is a dead position and the game is drawn immediately. Therefore, the answer is, there is no next move. So we can make a puzzle based on that rule. Since we are working on the retrograde chess puzzle, we are interested in the reachability. If a specific position requires to reach a dead position before reaching the position, because the game had to end at the dead position, the final position would be unreachable. So here's the example. White to move, what was the black's last move? If you want to solve it by yourself, pause the video now and solve it. Let's begin. Black has two possible last moves, the pawn or the king. Note that the king could only came from e8. Let's say the last move was to move the king. There could be a white piece on d8, it doesn't really matter. You see, every single black piece is stuck in their square except for the king. And the king has no square to move except for d8. So king d8 will be the only possible move for black. And after king moves, it's a draw, because you see, all of these pieces are stuck and cannot move. This pawn can move forward, but that doesn't have any effect. Therefore, the white king is stuck in these squares, the bishop is stuck in these squares, and the black king is stuck in these three squares. While white can check or stalemate, it's actually impossible to checkmate the black king. That's because black can only move their king, and there are only three squares the king can be on. Let these squares be A, B, and C. White must attack at least two squares at once to deliver the checkmate. But white does not have any piece that can attack two squares at once. So white should attack one by one, and the final attack should be delivered by the bishop. So it should go like this. White first prepares the bishop on g8. White king cannot directly attack the black king, so the black king should move to the square C by themselves, and the white king is just looking at it from distance. White king blocks the square B so that the black king cannot flee from the attack. White want to deliver the final check with the bishop. However, it's already a stalemate, so nobody can checkmate and the game is drawn. That means before the black king's move, it was a dead position. Black cannot move the king because the game has already ended, so that leaves pawn a4 to be the only possible last move. Now you might be curious if the game was already drawn before pawn a4. If that's the case, the problem has no right answer. I'll show you this position was not the dead position. I mean, there is a sequence for white to checkmate black. This black pawn was the key move. In the previous position, black could only move the king, so it ended with a stalemate. But in this case, black has the other option to move, so it's not a stalemate anymore. And that's the checkmate. Obviously, black should cooperate to mate their king, and that's usually called the helpmate. Yeah, that move doesn't make any sense, but we are not judging the move in a puzzle as long as it is correctly following the rules. Here's a very complicated example. Whose turn is unknown, and what exactly was the last move? If you want to solve it by yourself, you can pause the video now. Okay, let's assume black has just moved. So black should have moved their king, but from where? It could not came from b5 because that's next to another king. It could not came from c5 because white is double checking the king, and there's no way to make this double check happen. It could not came from d5 because this double check is also not possible. b7 on the other hand is possible, but that requires for white to capture something with their pawn on a6. But that's a trap. Let's get back to the initial position. How many black pieces are needed to be captured to make this pawn structure? That's a total of 15 captures. So white pawns captures every single black piece except for the king. And if you see carefully, the position is only possible if the white a pawn went straight up. So that means bringing the pawn from b5 is also not possible. So we can conclude that the last move was white. Now, observing the situation, you can see that this is a stalemate. So the dead position logic might be able to kick in. Let's say the white last move was any pieces other than the pawn, or the pawn going straight. That means black only had the king, so it limits the black's last move to be the king. But if that's the case, white still had no way to check the king from non-checking position. So we can conclude that the white last move was a pawn capturing something. Now seeing the position, the only possible pawn that could capture something in the last move was the b6 pawn. So that should be the last move. So the answer should be cx b6. But the puzzle is not over. Of course, cx b6 is not wrong, but there's a twist in the puzzle. Let's consider the black a pawn and the black b pawn. We know that they are eventually captured by white pawns, and we know this is the white a pawn and this is the white b pawn. So how could the black a pawn have been captured? It could capture something to get to the b file. And the only white piece that is currently not on the board is the queen. So black a pawn has captured the queen. And since no other pieces are lost, black b pawn went straight down. And because white a and b pawns are blocking the way, black a or b pawn couldn't have promoted. So that explains these two captures. The white pawns captured the black a pawn and the black b pawn on the b file. We are still not sure which one was the a pawn and which was the b pawn. We know that the white last move was cx b6, so it should be capturing the pawn. However, if that was the case, white is forced to take the black pawn since the pawn is checking their king. And there are three options for white to defend their king. This is a stalemate. And this is also a stalemate. And of course, this is also a stalemate. So whatever they choose, the game will be drawn with a stalemate. So this position is a dead position and white could not capture the pawn because the game was already over. So the only possible move to make this happen is the en passant. If the black pawn was on b5, that's not the checking position and white has other options to avoid the draw. So the final answer is cx b6 en passant. A very interesting fact is that this puzzle asks what was the last move and proved the answer was an en passant with no prior information as whose turn it is. This is the very first puzzle that achieved this composition. The puzzles introduced in my previous videos were from these two books written by Raymond Smullyan, but this video is composed from another article. The credits for this video go to Ambrona, Buchanan, and Frotin. There's a link to the original article about the dead position logic. This is the end of the Retrograde Chess puzzle series. I really appreciate you to watch this series and be interested in the Retrograde Chess puzzles. As always, thank you for watching and have a great day!